everyone and welcome to my channel. In this tutorial we'll explore Python string data type. In Python, strings are immutable sequences of characters and are used to handle textual data. Here are the key things you should know about strings. They are ordered, immutable, and iterable. Learning data types in each programming language is essential to understand the code and programs. String data type is widely used in many programming and machine learning solutions built in Python specifically to store some text-formatted data. In Python, you can create a string in several different ways. Let's take a look how you can create a string using single quotes. This is one of the most common ways of creating strings in Python and is very simple. Perfect. We see hello world printed. Now let's take a look how we can create a string using double quotes. This way of creating strings in Python is identical to the previous one, except now we will be using double quotes. Perfect. We see hello world printed. Next, let's take a look how we can create a string using triple quotes. This way of creating strings in Python is perhaps the most rare, as there are only a few cases when we want to use it. Enclosing characters in triple quotes will yield the same output as the previous two approaches. Perfect. We see hello world printed again. Now the question is, why would we ever use triple quotes? One main difference of using triple quotes is when you want to create a multi-line string, where different parts of the string are on different lines in the output. For example, let's separate our hello world string into two lines. Now let's run the code and see what we get. Perfect. As you can see, each word was printed on a separate line in the output. In Python, you can also create strings by using the string constructor. The string constructor takes any object and returns its string representation. So it will return a string representation if an object is one of the built-in Python objects, such as integer, float, complex number, boolean, and a few others. Or it will return an empty string if the object is empty. Let's look at a few examples of string constructor with different data types. Now let's print out the values. Let's run the code and see what we get. As you can see, we got the string representation of the Python built-in data types that are integer, float, complex number, and a boolean. An important and very useful property of a Python string is that it's an index sequence, meaning that for a string with n characters, the first character will have an index 0, second character will have index 1, and all the way up to n minus 1. A character in a string can be accessed by its index, and index can also be reversed, meaning that the first character will have an index equal to minus n, second character will have index equal to minus n plus 1, and all the way to minus 1. To make it easier to showcase, let's take a look at the following visualization. Here we can see the string Python, and each character in the string will have its own index. So the first letter P will have an index 0, Y will have index 1, and all the way to the last letter N, which will have index equal to 5. Now the length of the string is equal to 6, and as you can see, if we're counting from the first character will have index 0, and the last character will have index 5. Now as I mentioned before, we can also do the reverse. If we start from the end of the string, the last character will have index equal to minus 1. It's very important that it's not 0. It starts from minus 1 and goes all the way to the first character, which is P, and P will have index of minus 6. Now let's create this string in Python and print out its first character by using the indexes we just saw. We will access the first character of the string, first using the standard index, which is 0, and then also using the reverse index, which in this case will be minus 6. Now let's run the code and see what we get. As you can see, in both cases, the first character of the string, which is character P, was printed. Using indexes, we can also find the position of a character in a string. Let's reuse the string from the previous example, which was Python, and try to find the position or the index of Y character in a string. Using index method of a Python string, we can find the position of a character by passing the character as a parameter into it. Now, as you can see in the string, Y is the second character in the string, but if you remember, the indexing starts from 0, so the index of a second character in a string should be equal to 1. Now, let's run the code and see what we get. Perfect. As you can see, the position of Y character in the Python string has the index of 1. In one of the previous sections, we explored how to access a character from a Python string using its exact index. In this section, we'll explore how to access a range of characters, for example, first two or last two, or any other sequence of characters from a string. Recall that for retrieving characters from a string using an index, we placed it into square brackets. Slicing is using the same approach, but instead of passing a single index value, we will pass a range. A range in Python is passed using the colon, so we'll have some index from which we're slicing and some index to which we're slicing. Using ranges, we can slice the string to access multiple characters. Let's take a look at a few examples. And let's print out these sliced characters and see what we get. Here we've printed the first two characters. Here we printed the mid characters from second to fourth, meaning the second, third, and the fourth character. And their indexes are 1, 2, 3, respectively. And we've also printed the last two characters of the string. Notice that characters specified at toIndex are not included, since in Python slicing, the algorithm goes through characters until the specified toIndex and includes all characters up to that index, but not including the character under the toIndex. Recall that in the beginning we mentioned that Python string is an iterable object, meaning that we can iterate over characters in a string. Simple iteration can be performed using a for loop. Let's take a look. So we have our string that we used before. Now let's iterate over that string and print out every character on a new line. Now let's run the code and see what we get. As you can see, we've successfully iterated over a string and printed out every character of the string on a new line. In Python, we can also concatenate or combine multiple strings together to create a single string. The two most popular ways to concatenate strings in Python are using the plus operator or using the join method. Let's start with using the plus operator. Using the plus operator is one of the most common ways to concatenate multiple strings. Let's take a look at an example. We'll start by creating a few sample strings. Now we will concatenate these three strings and create a new string. And finally, we will print out the new string. Now let's run the code and see what we get. Perfect. As you can see, we've concatenated 3 strings together. If you have a slightly more complex case for string concatenation, you can try using Python join method. Python's string join method allows to concatenate a list of strings to create a new string. Let's take a look at an example. First, we'll start by creating a few sample strings. Next, we're going to concatenate the strings. But before that, let's discuss the syntax of the Python string join method. So what we will do is we will have our separator, and to that separator, we will join a list of strings. So it should look like this. So in our case, the separator is sep, and the list of strings that we have are s1, s2, and s3. Now let's concatenate these 3 strings using the separator between them. And finally print out the new string. Now let's run the code and see what we get. As you can see, we've successfully concatenated the 3 strings with a separator, where the separator is in between of each string. In Python, just as we can concatenate multiple strings into a single string, we can also split a single string into multiple strings. There are multiple ways of doing it, however, the most popular way is using the string split method, which splits a string into a list of strings based on the separator. Let's start by looking at the syntax of the split method. Let's take a look at an example. We'll start by creating a sample string. Next, we will split this long string into multiple strings based on the empty space between the words. And we'll print out the new strings. Now let's run the code and see what we get. Perfect. The result is a list of strings where the long string was separated into 4 individual smaller strings based on the empty space between the words in the long string. You can also specify a custom separator based on which you would like to split the string. For example, if our long string had commas as well as spaces between the words. Now, in this case, in order to split the string based on the comma and the space between the words, we'll simply need to add a comma in the separator based on which we split the string. Now let's run the code and see what we get. Perfect. As you can see, the result is identical to what we've seen before, even though our original string now has commas between the words, but because we adjusted the separator based on which we split the data, we were able to split the long string into individual words from that long string. In this tutorial, we explored Python string data type and a few operations that you can do with it. As your next step in learning Python, consider watching and reading my tutorials about other Python data types and data structures, including Python numeric data types, booleans, list data structure, dictionary data structure, set data structure, and many others. Feel free to leave comments below if you have any questions. Please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more of my Python programming tutorials.